The wedding planner, a woman with tight hair and an even tighter smile, began listing floral arrangements. Sarah May, seated beside me, cut her off with a wave of her hand. "Oh, and Cole Jensen will be joining us for the engagement party," she announced, her voice too bright. My fork, loaded with a slice of dry roast, clattered against the plate, the sound echoing in the sudden silence of the restaurant. Sarah May turned, her smile stretching thin. "Don't look so surprised, Hank. He's practically family." It was a strange thing, marriage. You spent years getting to know a person, peeled back layers like an onion, until you thought you saw the core. Then one day something shifted, and you realized you might have only ever seen the skin. You married them, or you planned to, and suddenly the ground beneath you felt less solid. A structural engineer by trade, I understood foundations. I knew how a small crack, if ignored, could compromise the whole building. I'd met Sarah May 4 years ago at a mutual friend's barbecue on the edge of Lake Michigan. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of charcoal. She'd been laughing, a bright, clear sound that cut through the drone of cicadas and casual chatter. Her eyes, the color of wet sand, crinkled at the corners. She wore a simple sundress, and her hair, the shade of corn silk, caught the setting sun. We talked for hours that night, leaning against a weathered picnic table, the easy conversation stretching into the cool darkness. It felt like finding a piece of myself I hadn't known was missing. We fit together, two halves of something quiet and real. Our life since then had been built on small moments and shared understanding. Morning coffee, silent drives, evenings spent reading in companionable quiet. Last spring, I'd proposed on a rickety pier overlooking the Gulf Coast, the salty breeze whipping her hair around her face. She'd said yes without a second's hesitation, her smile wide and genuine. We talked about a small house with a big porch, a garden, a future. It all felt certain. Then came a Tuesday evening, a week before the engagement party. I walked in the door, tired from a long day overseeing a new bridge construction on the outskirts of town. The familiar scent of something simmering on the stove filled the small entryway. Sarah May was in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred a pot. She glanced up, a casual smile on her face. "Hank, you're home. Dinner's almost ready." She stirred the pot, then added, "Oh, and I sent out the invitations for the party this morning." She paused, turning the spoon slowly. I included Cole Jensen on the list. My hand, reaching for the hook to hang my keys, froze midair. The keys, still dangling from my index finger, tapped softly against the wall. A knot, sudden and tight, formed in my stomach. "Cole?" My voice felt rough, unfamiliar. "Your ex-boyfriend, Cole?" Sarah May's shoulders gave a dismissive shrug. She didn't look at me directly, focusing instead on the steam rising from the pot. "Yes, Cole, it's not a big deal, Hank. We're adults." I walked into the kitchen, setting my keys down with a deliberate thud on the counter. The smell of dinner, whatever it was, suddenly held no appeal. "Sarah May, he's your ex. This is our engagement party." I kept my voice even, measured. "Maybe it's best if he's not there." She finally looked at me, her face unreadable for a moment. Then it hardened subtly. Her jaw tightened just a fraction. "No, I already sent it. It would be awkward to uninvite him now." Her eyes, those wet sand eyes, held a stubborn glint. "Awkward?" I pushed. "More awkward than having your ex-boyfriend at a party celebrating our commitment to each other?" She put the spoon down, a small clatter against the ceramic pot. "Are you getting insecure, Hank?" Her voice was flat, devoid of the earlier warmth. "I'm marrying you, aren't I?" The words hung in the air, cold and precise. "I'm marrying you, aren't I?" It felt less like reassurance and more like an accusation. It made me question everything we'd shared, every quiet moment, every promise. It felt like a transaction, not a bond. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "We're not even married yet." That phrase hit me harder than anything else. We're not even married yet. It stripped away the future we'd built, reduced it to a conditional, something that hadn't quite happened. The implication was clear. Until then, things were fluid, open to negotiation. Sarah May turned back to the stove, her posture stiff. "Cole is coming, end of discussion." Her tone left no room for argument. She stirred the pot again, the small movement final. I stood there watching her back. The woman in front of me, stirring dinner in our small kitchen, felt like a stranger, her corn silk hair, her familiar silhouette. But the person inside, the one who spoke those words, wasn't the Sarah May I'd fallen in love with, the one who laughed so freely on the lakeshore. That woman, it seemed, had stepped out for a moment. Later that night, I lay awake in our bed, the sheets cool against my skin. Sarah May slept beside me, her breathing light and even. I stared at the ceiling, the shadows from the streetlights playing across it. Her words replayed in my head, a slow, grinding loop. Not a big deal. We're adults. I'm marrying you, aren't I? We're not even married yet. End of discussion. Each phrase was a small, precise hammer blow, chipping away at something essential. I told myself to let it go. It was just a party. It was just Cole. But the unsettling feeling, like a stone in my gut, settled in for the long haul. 3 days later, I found myself back at the house earlier than planned. A scheduling conflict on the bridge project meant I'd wrapped up by 3 o'clock. The afternoon sun, weak for the time of year, angled through the living room window, striping the dust motes dancing in the quiet air. The house was usually empty at this hour, a silent space waiting for us to fill it. But as I pushed the front door open, a sound reached me from the back. It was Sarah May's laughter, light and clear, filtering from our bedroom. I stood in the entryway, my hand still on the doorknob, listening. It was a familiar sound, yet it held a particular warmth, a genuine, unburdened quality that felt different. Not wrong exactly, just distinct. Then her voice followed, soft and low. You always did know how to make me laugh. A pause, then a sigh that was almost a whisper. God, I've missed that. My hand tightened on the knob. The casual intimacy of the words settled over me, heavy and cold. I heard the muffled murmur of a reply, then Sarah May's voice again. No, he's still at work. Won't be back for hours. Another pause. Next Thursday? Yeah, drink sounds great. I'll text you about a place. My breath hitched. I hadn't even fully stepped inside. I slowly, carefully backed away from the door, pulling it shut with a feather-light touch until the latch clicked. Then I opened it again, this time with a deliberate push, letting it swing open wide enough for the familiar creak. I jingled my keys loudly as I walked the few steps to the coat rack, making sure my presence was announced. Within seconds, Sarah May emerged from the bedroom. Her cheeks were flushed, a little too pink, and her hair was slightly rumpled. A smile, a little too quick, stretched across her face. Hank, you're home early. Everything okay? Yeah, just a snag at the site. Got things squared away faster than expected. I kept my voice even, leaning against the doorframe, trying to appear relaxed. Who were you talking to? Oh, she waved a dismissive hand. Just my mom. She was telling me about Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning gladiolas again. She chuckled, a little too forced. You know how she gets. I nodded, a small internal nod. Lie number one, I thought. It settled in my gut, a bitter pill. Over the next few weeks, the phone became a permanent fixture in Sarah May's hand. She'd carry it from room to room, always face down when I was near, or angled just enough so the screen wasn't visible to me. She'd tap out messages, her thumb moving quickly, a faint smile playing on her lips, then quickly put it away if I entered the room. It was a subtle shift, a small, continuous motion that suggested secrecy, a careful guarding of something. I noticed it all. The way her attention would drift during dinner, only to snap back guiltily when I spoke her name. The sudden urgency to check her texts when my back was turned. One evening, we were watching a rerun on TV, an old sitcom we both liked. Sarah May was curled beside me on the couch, her phone resting on her lap, ostensibly dormant. Then, the screen flashed, a sudden bright rectangle of light against the dim room. My eyes almost instinctively darted to it. Just for a fraction of a second, the notification banner was perfectly clear. Blue looks amazing on you, always has, Cole. Her reaction was immediate, a sharp, almost violent twitch. Her hand flew to the phone, flipping it over, the screen vanishing into darkness. She cleared her throat, a little too loudly. Nothing, she said, her voice a shade too bright. Just Brenda Sue asking about a recipe. You know Brenda Sue and her recipes. She laughed, a short, brittle sound. Just friendly chat. I felt that familiar twist in my stomach, like a wet rag being wrung out. Lie number two, I logged it. Right, I said, turning my gaze back to the flickering screen. The canned laughter on the TV seemed distant, hollow. It wasn't Brenda Sue, and it wasn't friendly chat. It was Cole, and it was something more, Mike Basso. My mind, the part that dealt with structures and foundations, began to calculate, to predict. The cracks were widening. Then, about a month later, it happened again. Another early day for me at work, another quiet arrival home. This time the sound of voices came from the guest bathroom, a low murmur that hinted at an intimate conversation. I recognized Brenda Sue's voice, a steady hum, and then Sarah May's softer, tinged with something I couldn't quite place. I stopped dead in the hallway near the linen closet, half hidden by the open door. The wedding's in a few months, Bren, Sarah May's voice drifted out, a hesitant whisper. And I don't know if I'm ready. My heart gave a heavy thump against my ribs, a dull thud in the sudden silence of the house. I leaned closer, not wanting to, but unable to pull away. Brenda Sue offered a soft murmur of encouragement. It's just seeing Cole again. It's been complicated. Sarah May's voice was lower now, almost a confession. He gets me in a way Hank doesn't sometimes. He makes me feel alive again. The words hung in the air, suspended, precise, alive again. As if with me, she had been something less. I felt a coldness spread through my chest, a physical chill despite the warmth of the house. I backed away, silently, one careful step after another until I was out of earshot. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs, but my face felt calm, blank. When Sarah May and Brenda Sue finally emerged, an hour later, I was in the living room, ostensibly reading the newspaper, a faint smile on my lips, ready to ask about their afternoon. Inside, though, something fundamental had shifted. I was irrevocably changed. Sleepless nights became my constant companions. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant whine of a siren, the gentle rhythm of Sarah May's breathing beside me, all of it felt like background noise to the relentless turning of my thoughts. Who was this woman? Was our shared history, our quiet understanding, nothing but an elaborate illusion? The structural integrity of my life felt compromised. Sarah May's behavior grew more pronounced. The girls' nights became more frequent, and her return times pushed later into the night. Sometimes when she finally came home, a faint, unfamiliar scent of cologne lingered on her clothes. A fragrance that wasn't mine, wasn't hers. It was masculine, sharp, and it always seemed to cling to her like a second skin. She'd offer vague explanations, a busy bar, a late-running movie, the usual excuses. I just nodded, the questions piling up behind my teeth. Then one morning she emerged from the bathroom rubbing her neck. A small, purplish bruise bloomed just below her ear, barely visible beneath the edge of her hair. Clumsy me, she said, catching my eye in the mirror. Caught myself with the curling iron this morning. You know how I get. She forced a small, self-deprecating laugh. Lie number 3, I thought, the tally growing. The bruise didn't look like a curling iron burn. It looked like a hickey. That night, something inside me snapped. I found myself doing something I never thought I'd do, checking her social media. I felt a cold shame as I navigated to her profile, scrolling through curated photos of our life together, the smiling faces, the picturesque landscapes. It felt like an invasion, but the gnawing suspicion had finally overwhelmed my better judgment. At first, there was nothing direct, just subtle changes. A new filter she'd started using, giving her photos a slightly warmer, softer glow. A few tag locations in places I didn't recognize, downtown bars or trendy coffee shops, places we hadn't been to together. Innocent enough on their own, perhaps, but in the context of everything else, they felt like breadcrumbs leading somewhere I didn't want to go. Then I found it. A photo posted 3 days ago, tagged by a mutual acquaintance, another old friend from her past. It was a downtown rooftop bar, identifiable by the distinctive skyline in the background. Sarah May was there, seated at a low table, her profile angled toward the camera. And next to her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, was the unmistakable silhouette of Cole Jensen. His arm was casually draped over the back of her chair. Her expression in the photo was what truly gutted me. She was laughing, her head thrown back slightly, her face radiant. A genuine, unburdened joy that I hadn't seen on her face in months, not since before Cole Jensen re-entered our lives. She looked alive. The caption, penned by their mutual friend, settled like a stone in my chest. Throwback Thursday. Some reunions are written in the stars. She had old flames, he had new sparks. The words blurred. Old flames, new sparks. It wasn't just my imagination. It wasn't insecurity. It was happening. It was known. And I, her fiancé, was officially the last to know. 3 days before the engagement party, I met Caleb Reed, my best man, at our usual haunt, the Rusty Nail. The air was thick with the smell of stale beer and desperation. He slid into the booth opposite me, his expression immediately changing. "Hank," he said, pushing a coaster toward me, "you look like hell." I took a long pull from my beer, the cold, bitter liquid doing little to numb the ache. "I am hell, Caleb." And then it all spilled out, the invitation to Cole, the phone calls, the whispered laughs, the hidden text, the "blue looks amazing on you" message, the late nights and the strange cologne, the bruise on her neck, the curling iron lie, and finally the photo, the radiant smile, the hashtag. Everything. I laid it all out, a string of cold, hard facts. Caleb listened, his eyes steady and concerned, occasionally nodding slowly. He didn't interrupt, just let me talk until I ran out of words. When I finished, he took a sip of his own beer. "You need to talk to her, Hank. Confront her." "Confrontation?" I scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. "And what do I say? I saw a photo on Instagram and I'm pretty sure you're cheating on me with your ex-boyfriend?" "She'll just call me insecure again. Accuse me of not trusting her." I pushed my empty glass away. Caleb leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There's something else." He paused, his gaze meeting mine, unwavering. "Beth Ann saw them at that new hotel bar, the one downtown, last Friday night." My breath caught in my throat. Beth Ann was his wife. She didn't mince words. "She said they were pretty cozy," Caleb continued, his voice quiet. Deep conversation. "She saw him wipe a tear from Sarah May's cheek." He hesitated. "Then she saw him put his hand on her arm, hold it there for a minute." I picked up my glass again, finding it empty. I signaled the bartender, then drained the last drops of melted ice. The world tilted, then righted itself, leaving me cold and exposed. "So," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I'm officially the last to know my fiancé is having an emotional affair." The engagement party was held at a renovated barn on the outskirts of town, strung with fairy lights and filled with the murmur of well-wishes. I walked in, a manufactured smile stretched across my face, feeling like an actor in some slow-moving tragedy. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and the buzz of polite conversation. Every handshake, every congratulatory pat on the back felt like a lie. My eyes immediately scanned the room, bypassing the familiar faces of family and friends. It didn't take long to find him. Cole Jensen stood near the makeshift bar, laughing easily with some distant cousin of Sarah May's. He looked entirely too comfortable, too much at ease, as if he belonged here at our party. He wore a crisp, dark shirt that accentuated his broad shoulders, a casual confidence radiating from him. Sarah May, meanwhile, floated through the crowd, a vision in a soft blue dress that matched her eyes. She radiated charm, her laugh tinkling through the barn. She greeted guests, accepted compliments, played the perfect hostess. But I watched her, and I saw her eyes, even as she spoke to others, drift repeatedly toward Cole, a subtle pull, an almost unconscious seeking. At one point, she was talking to my Aunt Carol by the buffet table. Cole caught her eye from across the room, said something to the person next to him, and then offered a small private joke. Sarah May's face lit up, a genuine, unforced laugh bubbling up from deep within her. It was the same laugh I'd heard filtering from our bedroom that afternoon. It was an intimacy, a shared wavelength that stabbed me in the gut. They shared a history, yes, but this was something current, something alive. Caleb found me by the large oak doors, a half-empty glass of amber liquid in his hand. He didn't say anything, just gave me a long, knowing look. His gaze followed mine to where Sarah May and Cole were now chatting, their heads close together. The look on his face confirmed it. My observations weren't just the fever dreams of a paranoid man. "Hank," Sarah May called, her voice bright, breaking away from Cole. She glided towards me, taking my arm, her touch feeling foreign. "Cole, come meet Hank properly." Cole offered a polite smile, extending a hand. "Hank, good to see you again. Sarah May talks about you all the time." His grip was firm, his eyes direct, but there was a flicker of something beneath the surface, a challenge perhaps. "Cole," I replied, my voice flat, shaking his hand. "Good to see you too." The lie tasted like ash. The exchange was polite, strained, a thin veneer over something raw and ugly. I watched them both after that. The subtle leans when they spoke, a fraction closer than necessary. The way their gazes would linger a second too long. The comfortable ease in their body language that screamed betrayal. It was the unspoken language of people who understood each other on a deeper level, a language I felt increasingly locked out of. Aren't Sarah May and Cole getting along swimmingly? My second cousin, a woman named Martha who always seemed to miss the point, materialized beside me, a glass of punch in her hand. "Always thought they were such a handsome pair. It's lovely they can be friends." My blood ran cold. Handsome pair. Friends. The casual observation, spoken without malice, felt like a judgment, a public pronouncement of what everyone else could see, or at least suspect. Later, as the party began to thin, I saw Cole approach Sarah May near the guest book. She was reaching for a pen, her back slightly turned. Her dress, the blue one, had a delicate strap that had slipped slightly off her shoulder. Cole reached out, his fingers brushing her bare skin as he adjusted the strap, a gesture of casual intimacy that was entirely out of place for just friends. Their eyes met, a brief, silent exchange that held too much meaning, too much unspoken understanding. A hot wave of anger washed over me. For a moment, I considered walking straight over, dragging Sarah May away, making a scene, a public display of the crumbling foundation. But then a colder, more deliberate thought intervened. Not here, not like this. I needed more. I needed definitive proof, clarity, something she couldn't twist or deny. I needed to know exactly how deep this went. The party continued, the music playing softly, the lights twinkling. But for me, it had ceased to be a celebration. It was a charade, a bitter smile plastered over a future that was already crumbling beneath my feet. A cold resolve solidified within me. This wasn't going to slide. Not anymore. The drive home from the engagement party was cloaked in a silence heavier than any I'd ever experienced with Sarah May. The celebratory sounds of the barn, the polite chatter, the festive music, all of it seemed to fade into a hollow echo. Only the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the distant chirping of crickets filled the space between us. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, focusing on the yellow lines stretching endlessly ahead. Once inside the house, Sarah May moved to kick off her heels, but I stopped her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, yet carrying the weight of everything that had passed. She sighed, a weary put-upon sound. "Can it wait, Hank? I'm tired. It was a long night." "No," I stated, my gaze steady on her. "It can't." I recounted my observations from the party, the shared laughs, the intimate glances, Cole's hand on her dress. I laid it out piece by piece, not with accusation, but with the quiet precision of an engineer describing a failing structure. I spoke of the twisting pain in my gut, the feeling of being an outsider at our own celebration. She listened, her expression shifting from impatience to irritation. When I finished, she crossed her arms, a familiar defensive posture. "You're doing it again, Hank," she said, her voice rising sluggily. "You're being jealous and insecure. You ruined the evening. You know that?" I ruined it? My own voice remained calm, but the effort tightened my chest. "Yes, you were brooding all night. You make a big deal out of nothing, Hank. He's just an old friend, she continued, her voice cold now, dismissive. I can't believe you're turning our engagement party into an interrogation. An old friend doesn't send text messages about how good blue looks on you, Sarah May, I countered, my voice low. An old friend isn't having whispered conversations in the bathroom, talking about feeling alive again. An old friend doesn't leave bruises on your neck. Her eyes widened, a flicker of something, panic perhaps, before she smoothed her expression. The texts were innocent. Brenda Sue was having a meltdown about something. I was comforting her. And the curling iron, I told you about that. You're twisting everything. She began to weave a tapestry of excuses, each thread thin and transparent. And the rooftop bar, I pushed, watching her. The photo from 3 nights ago, the one with Cole where you look ebber than I've seen you in months. I watched for the impact. The hashtag Sarah May, hatch old flames at news parks. For a moment, her carefully constructed facade cracked. A fleeting shadow of guilt crossed her features, a tightening around her eyes, a hesitation in her breath. Then it vanished, replaced by a surge of anger, red and raw. What did you expect, Hank? She burst out, her voice sharp, cutting through the silence of the house. You've been distant. You're always working, always busy, always quiet. Cole understands me. He makes me feel alive in a way you haven't in a long time. She threw the accusations back at me, a torrent of words meant to deflect and wound. I stood there stunned, not by the anger, but by the sheer lack of remorse, the swift, seamless shift to blaming me for her choices. He makes me feel alive. The echo of that phrase, heard in the bathroom, now spoken directly to my face, landed with a sickening thud. It wasn't just an affair, it was an indictment of our entire relationship. The argument escalated then, not in shouting, but in the exchange of bitter, precise words, each one a chip off the foundation of what we thought we had. The silence we'd shared earlier felt like a gentle breeze compared to the frigid chasm now opening between us. Maybe we should postpone the wedding, I said, the words tasting like metal in my mouth, until we figure this out. She balked, her anger momentarily forgotten, replaced by a desperate denial. Postpone? No, don't be ridiculous, Hank. Everything is fine. This is just a misunderstanding. Her voice was pleading now, almost frantic. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate pattern of deceit. We retreated to separate rooms, the engagement party, a distant mocking memory. The fairy lights, the well wishes, the toasts to our future, all of it felt like a cruel joke. I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, the quiet hum of the house now sounding like a mournful dirge. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by this stranger, this betrayer. I couldn't marry her, not like this. As the quiet hours of the night dragged on, I couldn't help but wonder if any relationship, no matter how carefully constructed, could withstand such a foundational crack. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. In the days following our argument, a cold, hard determination settled over me. The emotional turmoil of betrayal, the ache in my chest receded, replaced by a calculating clarity. I had to know the full extent of it. I had to gather evidence beyond any doubt, a foundation of facts that couldn't be dismissed or twisted. This was no longer about saving a relationship. It was about uncovering the truth. I began a quiet, methodical investigation, drawing on the same systematic approach I applied to structural integrity reports. I checked our shared phone records, scrutinizing call logs and text message recipients. I delved into credit card statements, cross-referencing dates and locations. Every lunch charge, every weekend expense, every late-night coffee run became a data point. What I found was a pattern of charges for dinners and hotel rooms in places I'd never been. At times when Sarah May had claimed to be with her girls or working late, the digital breadcrumbs led directly to my suspicions, solidifying them into undeniable facts. I called Caleb, my best man, my oldest friend. He had seen the truth in my eyes, heard the cracks in my voice. I asked him to keep an eye out, to be discreet. Caleb, disturbed by the raw facts of the situation, offered his help without hesitation. A few days later, he called me, his voice low. Just wanted to pass along an anonymous tip, you understand? Heard from a buddy that Cole Jensen's been making frequent visits to Sarah May's office building during lunch hours. More than just saying hello, apparently. It was another piece of the puzzle, a confirmation of a pattern I already knew. But I needed more, something irrefutable, something that would stand up against any denial. So I hired a private investigator, a former cop named Dale. He was a quiet man with tired eyes and a reputation for thoroughness. I gave him the names, the locations, the dates I had already collected. I need proof, Dale, I told him, something undeniable. Well delivered, a thick envelope passed to me discreetly in a coffee shop downtown. Inside were photos, grainy but clear. Photos of Sarah May and Cole walking hand in hand, laughing, entering a quiet little hotel on the edge of town. Photos of them in intimate embraces in a dimly lit bar, their faces close, Cole's hand on her waist. There were even a few short video clips, time-stamped and undeniable. The images were stark, brutal. They crushed the last flicker of hope I might have harbored for reconciliation, for some twisted explanation that would make it all okay. There was no misunderstanding here. This was a calculated descent. I spent an entire evening reviewing our prenuptial agreement, a document drafted years ago when everything felt simple and permanent. I scoured every clause, every legal definition, looking for any specific mention of infidelity, any financial protection in case of marital misconduct. There was nothing explicit. The agreement covered assets, property division, but it hadn't accounted for betrayal. It hadn't accounted for the human element, the breaking of trust. The next day, I met with a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a calm demeanor. I laid out the evidence, the credit card statements, the phone records, Dale's photos and videos. She listened, her expression unreadable, occasionally scribbling notes. She explained my options, detailing the financial and emotional implications of a divorce, the legal processes, the necessary steps. It was a cold, clinical discussion, a stark contrast to the emotional wreckage I felt inside. She talked about assets, liabilities, equitable distribution. I talked about trust, betrayal, broken promises. We were speaking different languages. I left her office with a clear understanding of the path ahead, but the path she outlined, the quiet, dignified dissolution of a marriage, felt inadequate. Sarah May had chosen a public stage for her deceit, subtle though it was. She had allowed others to witness her betrayal, to gossip, to know something I, her fiancé, was supposed to be ignorant of. A quiet breakup would feel like a concession, a retreat. It would allow her to control the narrative, to minimize her actions. A different plan began to form in my mind, cold and precise. I wouldn't let this slide into a whispered secret. I wouldn't allow her to walk away unburdened. No, the truth deserved a grander stage, a final, undeniable revelation. The biggest stage of all, the wedding day itself. The wedding day arrived, a crisp autumn morning. The air outside the venue, a beautifully restored church from the 1800s, was cool and clear. Inside, however, a simmering tension was building, though no one but me seemed to feel it. I stood at the altar, dressed in my dark suit, the boutonniere pinned precisely to my lapel. A strange calm had settled over me, a quiet, almost detached resolve amidst the polite chaos of guests finding their seats, the soft music playing, the general air of anticipation. Guests filled the pews, their faces alight with expectation, entirely unaware of the storm that was about to break. Sarah May, I imagined, was in the back, radiant and oblivious, making final adjustments to her dress, preparing for the grand entrance. My eyes, however, found Cole Jensen. He was seated in the third row on Sarah May's side, next to her Aunt Margaret, a brazen guest at the wedding he had so thoroughly sabotaged. He offered a small, confident smile to someone across the aisle. Caleb, my best man, stood beside me, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a solemn stillness. He caught my eye, gave me a quick, firm nod, a silent acknowledgement of the plan we had discussed. Then the organ music swelled. The doors at the back of the church opened. Sarah May appeared, framed in the archway, breathtaking in her white gown, a veil obscuring her face, giving her an ethereal quality. For a fleeting second, a pang of what could have been shot through me, a sharp ache of loss for the dream we once shared. but it quickly faded, replaced by the cold, hard facts. She walked slowly down the aisle, her father at her side, her face radiant, her eyes finding mine as she approached. Her smile was innocent, a beautiful lie. The ceremony began. The officiant, a kind-faced man from Sarah May's family church, started with the usual readings, the gentle words about love, commitment, and lifelong partnership. I let the words wash over me, hearing them as if from a great distance. When he reached the point for the vows, the sacred promises, I stepped forward, away from Caleb and the officiant. The flash drive, warm from my palm, was hidden securely in my pocket. I reached for the microphone stand, pulling it closer. A few guests shifted, confused by the unexpected deviation. Before we proceed with the vows, I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the microphone, echoing slightly in the old church. My gaze swept across the assembled faces, lingering for a moment on Sarah May, who stood before me, her smile faltering, a puzzled frown beginning to form. I have something important to share with everyone here today, something about truth and trust, and the foundation of what a marriage truly means. A low murmur rippled through the pews. Sarah May's father, confused, began to whisper something to her, a prearranged signal. The projector, hidden at the back of the church, flickered to life. The large screen, usually reserved for hymn lyrics, illuminated the front of the church directly above the altar. And then, the first image appeared, a crystal-clear photo of Sarah May and Cole, locked in an intimate embrace outside that downtown hotel. Then another, and another. Video clips, silent but damning, followed, showing them entering and leaving the hotel together, holding hands, laughing, sharing kisses. Gasps, sharp and sudden, erupted from the crowd. Sarah May's face drained of all color, turning ashen. Her eyes, wide with horror and disbelief, darted from the screen to me, then to Cole, who was now scrambling from his seat, trying to melt into the aisle. But Caleb, positioned strategically, subtly shifted his weight, blocking Cole's immediate exit, ensuring he would witness the full fallout. My voice remained calm, steady, despite the rising tide of chaos around me. These images, I continued, indicating the screen, are proof of a betrayal that has been ongoing for months. Lies about girls' nights, excuses about late work, secret phone calls, hidden texts, an affair with Cole Jensen. Right here. I gestured pointedly towards Cole, who now stood frozen in the aisle, trapped. I have documented all of it, every lie, every deception, every credit card statement for dinners and hotel rooms I never shared with my fiancé. Sarah May began to tremble, her hands clenching into fists. I cannot, in good conscience, I concluded, my voice firm, marry someone who has so thoroughly betrayed my trust, who has built our supposed future on a foundation of deceit. Therefore, I am canceling this wedding, effective immediately. For a beat, a stunned silence descended. Then, pandemonium. Sarah May let out a piercing scream, a guttural sound of pure anguish and rage. Her father, his face purple with fury, lunged towards me. Her mother began to sob hysterically. Guests murmured in shock, a wave of whispers, gasps, and furious exclamations washing through the church. The carefully orchestrated calm of the morning shattered into a million pieces. The reception hall, a place meant for joyous celebration, for toasts and dancing, for the launch of a new life, instead became a scene of public humiliation and raw, exposed emotion. The caterers, with their trays of untouched hors d'oeuvres, looked on, wide-eyed. Sarah May, still in her white dress, stood like a statue, her face streaked with tears and disbelief, her dream wedding shattered, her reputation in tatters before everyone she knew. Her family, led by her father, quickly converged on me, their faces contorted with rage.